None. I'm making it! Hey! Anybody not heard this song before? It was fun. Come on. Really? We can start by doing making it stories. Okay. And we're back.
Yeah.
So hey, it's great. Thanks for coming out. This is like, one of those brave shows that decided to go forward and let's do the show and let's see if the fans will come out. And it's just a pleasant surprise to see that in these days and times that if we take the precautions that we're supposed to and we listen to the people that we're supposed to listen to, and I mean the scientists tell us to do the things that we're supposed to do, we have a chance of having a life while we try to navigate through this pandemic. So I'm delighted to be here. I said I'd be here, and I knew that I was going to do what was going to be necessary to do in order to come out and meet some fans. I've been doing shows for a number of years. A lot of you know me from, making it is sort of a funny story. I'll just tell you a little bit about my career, with certain things that happened in the progression of things that I'm sort of known for. And I know a lot of you, this is a Days of the Dead horror convention. If you have questions about American Werewolf in London, certainly I have a lot of stories about them, about the show and how it impacted my life, but particularly what it was like just being on the day to day making this movie. It was pretty special. But my thing was high school musicals. That's where I started my thing. It was in high school. I grew up in Connecticut. I was in a high school musical or two. My family, I'm the youngest of three. My older brother James is also an actor. He was in Planet of the Apes. If you folks watch the TV series of Planet of the Apes, one of the astronauts in that show was James Naughton, who was my older brother. And so we were coming up from Connecticut. We were just sort of heading towards a career as actors, which was not. My parents were teachers. We were going, actors? No, nobody becomes an actor. Nobody does that. You do it for fun. You do it in high school. But we just kept at it, and my sister was in education. She's between my brother and myself. She became a teacher, and she was like the normal one. My brother and I became actors. And so when he was doing Planet of the Apes, he's older than I am. He was doing Planet of the Apes for Fox, the series, which, are you guys Planet of the Apes fans, or do you know about this? Yeah, so the whole story of the movies. And Roddy McDowell wanted to do the series, and so Fox had the series. The problem was it was so expensive to do because the makeup, Dick Smith makeup, which this does have a storyline. It's a Dick Smith makeup. By the time it got to being television, these hour episodes were costing the studio way too much money. This was 1974, so long ago. Back to when I was just getting out of college, and I went out to California to visit my brother. And sure enough, I had the necessary brown eyes to be a chimp. So he got me on the show. It was one of my first TV gigs. I got to be in makeup as a chimp. There's an episode called The Surgeon, in which I come on and have like 2 lines in an episode of Planet of the Apes, a Dick Smith makeup. The only reason I say that to you is because who studied with, Dick Smith, but of course Rick Baker, who has obviously gone on to, win 7 Academy Awards. And the very first Academy Award he won was for American Werewolf in London. In fact, he created a category at the Academy for special makeup because this movie, The Howling, there were films, makeup was just getting people's attention to the point where they needed to recognize the achievements in special makeup and special effects, and created a category. Up until that point, films, and particularly horror films, were not considered A movies, mainstream. They were all small or B film, whatever B was. We used to call it, B meant budget. You were on a B film meant you were on a very strict budget. That didn't mean it was bad. nor did it mean it was insignificant. But the Academy certainly didn't really recognize, as you look through the years in the 40s and 50s and 60s, 30s and 30s, until, you know, The Wolf Man. And there are obviously a history of those films, and we talk about it in American World, you know, Lon Chaney Jr. So my point is that this Rick Baker makeup was so significant; it was recognized by the Academy, and he won, you know, and it was really fun to be thanked by Rick Baker through the Academy Awards in 1982, as they sat there and went, "Wow, what just happened this last year?" So let me just back up and say, after my little Planet of the Apes experience, I was studying acting at the time in London. I graduated from college in Philadelphia, and I went over to England to study acting, which was sort of our thing. As I said, we came from a family of educators. My father and mother were both teachers initially. My dad went on to become a professor. And so that was the sort of thing you do. So, well, if you want to do that, you got to get training. And that's something I still tell young actors who are up and coming or want to, you know, pursue any career, is learn how to do it, rather than just, unless, you know, there are those that are so gifted that they just know how to do stuff without, you know, formal training. But when it came to acting, my brother had gone to drama school. I decided to apply for some drama schools over in England, for no other reason than just the scholarship had become available at college to study abroad, and it was to study something in any field in Great Britain. So I said, well, acting, you know, acting in Great Britain, that'd be fun. So I applied for the scholarship. I didn't get it, but I auditioned for this drama school called Lambda, London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, and was accepted, and just decided, you know, on my own, went over to London and started this 3-year program. But it was, I knew I wasn't going to be there for 3 years, but I wanted to live in London and see what that was like. And this is in the 70s, and it was really an amazing opportunity for me. Of, you know, talk about travel being such a broadening experience, and it was. I'd never been outside of the U.S. I've been to Canada. Does that count? I don't think so. But you know, I really had never been anywhere, and certainly on my own. Even though college, you're on your own, but you're sort of not always, you know. But actually being over, you know, getting off a plane in London and going, wow, this is different. And finding out what it's like to be an American studying acting in a country where they're pointing out to you what's so American about you. And then having to become sort of a person who was not defensive, but I was now an American working, you know, living in London as a drama student, and realizing there's a completely different approach to acting from the British standpoint. And anything that was people were criticized about, it's so American, and then having to be, you know, defend Americans, and not really knowing what an American approach to acting was. I was sort of the epitome of that. And then I had to become an expert on, you know, on politics, foreign policy. This was the 70s, Nixon, those years, and you know what they all thought. And you find that out when you study abroad, is you have to become the spokesman for everything that's going on in your country when you don't even necessarily pay attention to that sort of stuff. So it was a real eye-opening experience for me. What was fun about it was just getting to see so many actors, you know, who would come to our school, or you know, seeing them afterwards as an actor, full-time student as an actor. I got to work in a theater just in front of house as an usher, but you know, it was a play. I got to see people like Malcolm McDowell on stage every night, you know, when he was young, and other people, and watch them, and see them afterwards in a pub, because it's what everybody did, go to the pub afterwards, and realize that these are real people. This is what they do for a living, and it is attainable, it's achievable, you can do this. And the people that came to Lambda were, you know, these were the greats of the 70s who I got to see on stage, like Laurence Olivier, you know, John Gielgud, and Alec Guinness, and all these, Paul Scofield, all these old great actors, British actors, but they were still like, talk funny, you know, when you get them off stage, and you still have a beer with you, swear, cuss. You know, Albert Finney cussing, going, wow, this is, I mean, you know, realizing these are real people. And that's what what brought acting a little closer to me as possible, and endeavor was the fact that these were real people who had been doing it, and they were working in the theater, which was what I wanted to do. So anyway, that was my I did a 2-year experience there, and returned to New York, where it was like, okay, now what? And started auditioning in New York in the 70s, which was, a different thing. You try to do regional theater. It's like, what is that? And there are these things called unions. You go, what do you mean a union? Well, it so happened, I auditioned for the New York Shakespeare Festival. They used to do Shakespeare in the Park, Central Park, and they had a production of Hamlet with Sam Waterston that everybody knows from Law and Order and other things, but it was Sam's Hamlet. He's a young guy, this is 76, Sam was probably 36 years old. And we had this cast of 45 people, and I auditioned for this thing, and I got a part to be an ensemble in a production of Hamlet at the Lincoln Center in 1976 was my first professional job. And I was so excited because I was coming from England where I thought I knew everything about Shakespeare. And I'd seen the Royal Court Theatre and the Royal Shakespeare Company doing productions, and here I was, this American know-it-all with no previous experience. And it was just where I started in New York, and also going out for commercials and getting an agent and finding out how do you become a professional actor is you need an agent in order to send you up for things, and finding a way to earn a living and have to pay for stuff, and how do you do that and act, and so you all become professional waiters and you work in the restaurant business or other businesses which are a little more flexible in their hours, so they allow you to do the things that you really want to do. So that was just sort of how I started, and I got this gig. Said, how good a dancer are you? And when you're young, and I say young, I think at any age, you always say to your agent, "Of course I can." Can you ride a horse? Of course I can ride a horse. How good are you at skiing? I'm a great ice skater. Really? Oh, can you dance? Oh, are you kidding? I'm trained. Well, these are all lies from my standpoint. But you gotta say yes, and then you're thinking, I'll figure it out. I was absolutely fearless. I will try. I'll learn. How hard can it be? We used to say, and I found out the hard way. Numerous times. Going in for a commercial for the Lipton cup of soup. You got to be a skater. Okay. We're in New York. It's April. How are they going to know? They will be at this rink at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Oh shit. And sure enough, I was called out. I wasn't a good skater. You had to come up, skate up, stop, look in the camera, and say, "About a Lipton cup of soup," or something to that effect. And almost took the guy out. I couldn't stop. It was ugly. Thank you for coming in. Who let this guy in? Same thing with the Broadway dance auditions. These Broadway dancers are extremely trained. They've been step dancing since they were 10, and they're in there and they know steps. And you try to learn a routine in like 5 minutes, and they have the routine. And then they call you up, and you have to do that routine. And you just watch the guy teach you. Well, I'm in the back going what? And that was my experience going to this audition for a company called Dr. Pepper. We did 3 commercials, national commercials, 60 and 2 30-second commercials. We're going to travel from New York to San Francisco. It's a 20-day shoot. This would be a good one to get. I remember my agent saying, I went, I'll go. I don't dance. It's been proven. It's these other auditions. So I went, and there was something about just not giving a damn and just being loosey-goosey, and not too professional dancery like looking that got me a call back and got me another call back. And over the course of 3 weeks, my life changed. I got cast to be the spokesman for this company, to do the lead singing and the lead dancing in these commercials, which was a 20-day shoot, if you can imagine, for 60 and 2 30-second commercials. 2 minutes of film, 22-day shoot. Now, I've done movies since then, whole movies in less than 22 days. This was a big budget, but particularly because it was travel. We started in New York, Then we moved and did these commercials for using big locations, like the St. Louis Arch, New Orleans, French Quarter, that sort of idea. So we had to be at those places, and that took time to shoot, and we'd cast locally. And then I got a chance to see what it's like to be on the other side of casting, not just the guy waiting out in the hall to come in and do my routine or whatever it was I was auditioning. I got to be in the room and watch actors come in and audition for our Dr. Pepper commercials. And it was an eye-opening experience for me to see how difficult it was to get hired. You could be so qualified and so particularly great, but, oh, your hair is brown. Oh, it's too red. Oh, whatever. And in commercials, there's always a committee that's casting, so nobody can agree on how you. So it was a very, it was a real eye-opening experience there as well. And that thing lasted for 4 years. I was the Pepper guy. It was crazy. I didn't, I was just trained Shakespearean actor being a Pepper. How did that happen? And I just remember people saying, don't plan your career at an early age. And I think that can apply to anybody, and whatever it is you do. You may have a plan, but be open-minded about what your plan is, because you may not, you may have this whole idea of what your career path is going to be, but it may just all of a sudden zig and go with it. Go with it. So don't say no. I had to learn that too as an actor. Don't say no. That's when I was saying about lying, about, sure, I can, what? Last solo? Heck yeah. Rodeo cowboy? I'll try. No, I couldn't do any of that stuff, but I knew that if I said no, I knew what the word no was going to get me, and I've always said that throughout my career. No means nothing. Nothing's going to happen. So say yes and see what happens. Now that can bite you in the butt, so you end up in a film that looks pretty awful. I have a couple of those on my resume. I don't talk about them much. Unfortunately, either do you when you come to the table. Hi, do you have anything from Sharknado? No. But, you take a chance a lot of times, and that's the whole point, is because you don't really know where it's going to lead you. So here I am being a Pepper, and I get this opportunity to be in a series, and the show is called Making It. It's based on Saturday Night Fever. It's 1979-80, and it's ABC. We got 13 on the air. Half-hour show, no pilot, just automatic series. Wow. So now, what's that mean? It means you get to, you don't have to be a waiter anymore. You're going to be on a TV series. You have to move to California, which is what I did, and did the show called Making It, which didn't, on ABC. That followed Mork and Mindy, and we were a huge hit for 2 weeks when we were behind Mork and Mindy. And then they move you and you die because Gary Coleman, Different Strokes, and the Hulk bury you. And you find out what that's whole like, being in a time slot, having the show. But in the course of that, I got a chance to record the song for the show, this theme song called Making It. Damn, the thing went to number 5 in the top 40. I had a top 40 hit. What? You heard it. It's like, what's that? I don't know. How'd you plan that? I didn't really plan it at all. I just had an opportunity to go in and sing it, and they released it, and RSO label, this was Stigwood, Robert Stigwood organization, who had this little group of Australian guys called the Bee Gees, and that was the focus. But the Bee Gees and Robert Stigwood, RSO, had a little fight, so everybody on that label got sort of collateral damage. We all lost because the Bee Gees and Robert Stigwood didn't agree to how many millions of dollars they each wanted. So many of us who were on that label just sort of lost our chance to continue. But this was a time where I was thinking, wow, what would that be like now? Because in the 70s, 79, 80, when you're doing Making It, you're in a studio, you have to deal with studio time, you have to pay all these musicians. Whereas now, my daughter who sings and records, usually they're doing it at home. As many of you, if you've dabbled in doing independent things, and we can talk about little independent movies as well, how inexpensive with the right software it is to make your own whatever. Film, make your own movie, make your own recording, cut, 8-track, 16-track, 24-track soundtrack and make songs and get them heard. And we have the social media for people to find them. So it's really amazing what you can do if you're at all creative. At the time, we were all dependent on everybody else as singers. But anyway, so in the course of those times of being, I was getting sort of disenchanted with being the spokesman for the soft drink. I had these, visions of other things for my career, and realizing that this series of Making It, which looked so promising but wasn't because we got moved, had nothing to do with the quality of the show or whatever. I had an opportunity to meet a guy named John Landis, who had this movie that he'd written when he was 21, and now he was this big 32-year-old success story with Animal House and the Blues Brothers, and had a big office at Universal Studios, and could make the film that he wanted to make next, which was his own movie that he couldn't make when he was 21, and writing it as a production assistant on Kelly's Heroes. You remember that movie? Kelly's Heroes. John was a PA. A PA is a production assistant. That's where, a gopher. Do whatever they tell you to do. You're a kid on a show and you want to learn how to be in movies. You start somewhere in production as a PA, and that's what John was. But in the course of that, he wrote this screenplay called American Werewolf in London. And that's the movie we shot. The movie he wrote when he was 21, and one of his first screenplays. Pretty crazy. And he had this friend who liked to make models and molds and Halloween masks and use his mother's oven to cook his little masks in. And his name was Rick Baker. And Rick and he were buddies and did a couple of little silly movies, back in Super 8, one of them which was a thing called Schlock, which is still available. I don't know if anybody's seen it. Movie buffs, and people see John Landis and Rick Baker's first collaboration. But they made a pact going, look, when I get to make my werewolf movie, you gotta promise me you'll do the makeup. Okay, Rick says, as the story goes, as I've been told. Okay. Well, Rick gets it. He gets busy on things like Star Wars. He's making all those little characters in the bar and all those freaky, listen to me explain these freaky little characters. These are Rick Baker's creations. And he gets even better and starts working on others. Now, I don't know his entire chronology, but he had promised John Landis, that he would do the movie if John ever got the money to make the film. But meanwhile, you can't wait for your buddy to get his movie, the money together. You have to continue to work. So Rick got on this movie called The Howling. What? Well, when John heard that, that was a nice impetus to go out and make sure he got money for his movie, and called Rick and said, Rick, you can't make that movie. You gotta make my movie. And okay, well, when's your movie gonna be made? All right, well, we'll start Monday. I mean, literally, to get Rick back on his show, John had to scramble to get the money. And how he came upon doing it is a story that he tells of really just going in and basically borrowing like $10 million, on the basis of his name with a screenplay he wrote 10, 12 years ago. Yeah, I'll make this movie. They go, well, here's the thing, here's the money. You make the movie, you deliver us the film. And that's how we're gonna do it. It's called raise the money himself. So he was on the hook for the money. And Universal later gets involved. They don't put up the money. So John Landis is on the neck. So off we go. So he's looking to find these guys to play the two leads in his little story, which is somewhat autobiographical. But he's looking around and he knows everybody. Everybody wants to work for John Landis at the time in 1980. And I got an opportunity to meet him. And went into his office and talked to him about, well, I'd been studying in England, I'd been to England, I was a student there, and he knew my Dr. Pepper stuff. And he later told me, and he gave me the script and said, read this. And here's the number of this office. Call me tomorrow and tell me what you think. I'd never had that experience before where the director writer gives you the screenplay and tells you to go read it and call him and tell him what you think of it. My, career up to that point had always been, like most actors, you get an opportunity to read for the director a small piece of the script, prepare it, go in and audition, and that's generally all you get. And this was a cool opportunity, and I read the script, and you'd see in a little one line, David transforms into a werewolf. You turn the page, and it's cut to, and you don't really pay a lot of attention to what that's going to involve, but the screenplay was something I certainly understood, resonated with. A couple of guys going backpacking to England. I told him that. We had a very informal conversation, which is what you have with John, because he's such a goofball. He's just an easygoing guy, but he's brilliant. He's not what he appears to be. He's watching and seeing, and has an amazing eye. And he said, well, do you want to be a werewolf? When I called him the next day. It was that simple. I went, do I want to be? Yeah, of course I want to be a werewolf. I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, I'd love to be a werewolf. He says, okay, I need you to get over to Rick Baker's shop. And Rick Baker at that time, if you could only see how he retired last year and had this gigantic studio of his own practically, he had a little rented garage space where he had these young guys from college age, guys who were his apprentices, working in a little informal shop. And I went over and met him and said, hi, John Landis sent me over here. My name's David Naughton. And he goes, which role are you playing? I said, I'm playing the role of David. He goes, I feel sorry for you. Come on in. And proceeded, I could feel sorry for me. What are you talking about? Only to find out that what we were about to do was this preliminary makeup and having molds of my arms and legs and head and legs. I said legs. Head. Did I say head 5 times? 5 times having my head and face. And it was nothing like I could prepare for or understand. There's no actors I could call around town going, hey, this guy Rick Baker, does he know what he's doing? You won't believe what I had to do this afternoon. And we spent time, and John was still looking to cast the Jack role, my friend, which was later, out of New York, found Griffin Dunn, and got Griffin involved in getting over to Rick's shop very soon after I started, because we needed to get this thing going. So this was like October, and we get in to do this preliminary makeup with Rick, and as I said, these were molds of getting this hadn't been done, to my knowledge, certainly very, very well. And we had, started with the legs. Like, oh, what's the big deal? You put your, leg in a big vat, this quick drying cement, and then try to get it out. And then, then he's got the beginnings of a mold, which he then fills and makes a mold of your leg. It looks like your leg. Hey, cool. Then just try your arms. So you drew your arm. Take 20 minutes for this thing to dry and pull it out. Hey, okay. Well, that was great. Next week we're doing your head. Now that's not so much fun. And if everybody's, and over the years, a lot of people have done this. I mean, Rick Baker has since, and because he retired and he sold a lot of his stuff, he had molds of all these famous actors on his wall. Eddie Murphy all over the wall, Tommy Lee Jones, and, Michael Jackson, of course, and all these, but they all had to go through what I had to go through, which is that quick drying makeup. It goes in your head, and it's just like having a cast. If you've ever broken a bone and you wear a cast on your arm or leg. So now imagine one on your head. And in the course of that, also having to do expressions. It says, okay, this time I want you to do a real life. Oh, okay, and hold it. Okay, hold it while that thing dries. And you're in there, and they're talking to you going, can you still breathe? What? So that's what that was like. And this is all the preliminary stuff in October, November. He's working on this stuff. January, we fly over to England. February, we start shooting this movie. And, we're meeting, Griffin and I are the only Americans on the show, and we have difficulty getting work permits in England, of course, so they had already looking at and scouting locations in France to be called American Werewolf in Paris because England is so tough in giving actors permission to work there when they have so many out-of-work actors. So why can't you use one of our actors? So John had to hold auditions for our roles in England. We've already got all the makeup of our guys that we've been doing for 3 months, but yeah, well, all those auditions for these roles that are already cast, just to get us permission to shoot there. Trying to convince England and British Equity that we're also hiring your entire crew and everything that's going to be shot here. These are a lot of jobs we're creating. If you're going to deny us 4 work permits and have us go to France to make this movie, you're losing a lot of work for all your other, technical people. Oh, okay. So we got to make the movie there. And we started shooting in February and finished the film in April. And the movie came out in August of 1981, August 9th or 6th. So really from October the previous year to August was casting, literally casting, molding, shooting, editing, and all the post-production was done in London, and the film was released in August of 1981. Point being, John was trying to race to see which werewolf movie was going to be one of the first werewolf films out, and which film, is it The Howling, American Werewolf in London, this race, and the studios were all very interested because they'd all passed on this film years before when John was trying to pass the screenplay around and trying to get the movie made. So finally it was going to be. And when it was released, it was mixed reviews, primarily because this was a type of show that hadn't been done before, which is always kind of funny going, well then why wasn't it this, why wasn't it more successful in its reviews? Well, because they hadn't seen a film with comedy before that's a horror film. That's funny and horrific and gruesome and Rick Baker makeup that you haven't seen before. It'll blow your mind back then. So how do we review this? John Landis is known for comedies. What is this thing he's throwing at us? And how are we supposed to take it? I mean, those were the kinds of reviews that we were met with. And I was just basically trying to see, does the film work? How does the makeup look? How do our performances, do you buy this whole idea that there's werewolves and we become them, and how is it? So that was that. Little did I know that, it'll be 40 years next year that I'll be hanging out in Indianapolis at Days of the Dead talking about American Werewolf. No, you don't, you have no idea. And I think over the course of these 39 years, what's happened is the film has been more appreciated as time has gone on for a lot of different reasons. One of which is, of course, Rick Baker set the bar so high for practical makeup, and then all that digital makeup came in. It was sort of a cool fad, and here's ways of CGI and all that sort of stuff took over for practical makeup. And Rick could be the guy to be standing up here and telling you about how that's impacted the industry. I can just tell you as an actor, you watch it, you like it or do you not like it? Are it in the hands of, do they know how to use it? It's a new technology, and for my money, I wasn't so impressed with, digital effects. Now they get better, and I think that less is more, certainly. But for practical makeup, this was one of those films that people pointed to over the years that said, hey, this is the stand, this is where the bar is in terms of practical makeup. Check this out. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's had sort of the longevity that it has. There's also the werewolf tradition. It's a long-standing tradition from the Lon Chaney and before. There was a film, Werewolf of London in the 30s. And this was another werewolf film in a long line of, and there will be more. I'm just lucky to have been in it. And from my standpoint, what appealed to me was there was a story. There was something that I could understand. What appealed to me was there was a love story there. There was this whole story of a guy who really, as I interpreted it, had sort of his tragic flaw was sort of a terminal illness. the illness, the terminal situation that he had was he had this werewolf issue that he couldn't believe, and he was in total denial, as many people are who have terminal situations. And so it was something that I could grasp in terms of, oh, okay, he doesn't believe he's, this is going to happen to him, and that's a much easier way, not easier, but let's say a more understandable way to approach the role from an acting standpoint. And working with John Landis was different for me because, as I said, I came from a sort of much more traditional, formal approach to acting, and not having had a lot of experience in films. I've done a few things, done a few television and film things, but to be working with a guy who is so informal and likes to play practical jokes on you and anybody, and everybody's fair game when you're on a set with John Landis, it makes you, you either have to embrace that or you get really guarded. And I don't think you get, you do your best work when you're really, holding back. So you just kind of, the choice I made was, hey, I'll go for it, How many times do I have to be naked in this movie, Let's talk, what's going on? And it was very freeing in the sense that there was nothing that you could throw at me that I wouldn't be able to say, I don't think I can do that, or that doesn't, because this was a point in my life. I was a young man, turning 30. I was really thinking, sure, I'll give you 100%, let's see what happens. And could I do that same movie again? Not for that money, but it's just one of those life-changing experiences, which obviously I enjoy, and it's why I'm here this weekend. So that's enough out of me. Thank you for listening. You've been very attentive. If anybody has any questions about things, I have some stories about werewolf, the making of the film. One of the things I should tell you about the movie, which is pretty neat, is we did everything there. There's no trick photography. Everything you see actually happened. I mean, the transformation, obviously is Rick Baker's magic, and having arms stretch and so forth. But the shooting in Piccadilly Circus, we actually had a car accident this huge crash in the real Piccadilly Circus. Piccadilly Circus, for those of you that haven't been to London, is just a big, giant five huge roads all converge on one big roundabout, which they call a circus, and it's Piccadilly, and they don't allow you to shoot in it. You can't make movies in Piccadilly, particularly stage a car accident. Sorry, it's one of our major thoroughfares. So what did Landis and his team do? They decided, okay, 5 at dawn, we're gonna crash. We're gonna have cameras all over the top. And then, this is what's called stealing a scene, where you don't have permission to shoot. But we're gonna be there. And this is going to take one take, all cameras will roll, all radios, all men will be in the 5 streets, all stunt drivers, 3 cars deep, and on action, go for it. And we'll all crash here, and that'll be that. Let's see what happens. So I had to see this. So I'm up at 4 in the morning, whatever, going down to Piccadilly. This is going to be cool. I don't know what's going to happen. And we're all waiting. And then all of a sudden, roll sound. Action. And these cars just, and it's not closed off. It just happens to be 5 in the morning. It's kind of, on a Sunday, it was like not a lot of traffic in Piccadilly Circus, fortunately, until action. And all hell breaks loose. All these cars come in and crash. And you see all these things, a bus starts to turn, all these stunt drivers, and cut, you get it? Good, that's a wrap. And then within 2 minutes, whoosh, Piccadilly Circus is empty. It's like, what just happened? That was cool. Now what happens then is they go to a set where they build all the same buildings and facades, and they do what's called inserts, B-roll, where they do all the little close-ups which they intercut with that big master that they shot or stole. And that's just one of a lot of stuff that we did on that movie that, you know, you get away with. And it's like, they say catching lightning in a bottle. Everything worked out on that movie, you know, all sorts of little scenes and little opportunities to capture it, and it worked out and cut together. It made this kind of this cool movie. All right, I was saying questions. I will shut up now. Yes.
So, what was it like acting with the Griffin puppet?
Oh, did everybody hear the question? What was it like acting with the Griffin puppet? Really, no different than working with Griffin, I would say. No, Griffin was, you know, I have to say, having done the Dr. Pepper stuff, I was working with animated characters, Popeye, Bugs Bunny, characters that you didn't even see. You have to react to, hey, they're going to put them in later, you know, and they used to give you these little places to look, and you'd be, you know, acting with an, you know, an imaginary animated character. So it wasn't so hard to actually have this puppet there and have Griffin behind wherever voicing that character. So it's just, you know, it's just another day, another scene, really. It's not so different. I mean, the setup for it, you have to wait for things to be able to work mechanically, but, you know, it's really not that difficult. You know, it's just another character. In the same way that the other English actors that were in, probably my favorite scene is in the movie theater when all the victims are there trying to decide, how are you going to kill yourself? An electric shock. You know, and all that sort of stuff. And those people, it was fun because they're into it too, but they're all bloody and they're all, and so it became that world make-believe that is what happens on a set. That you absolutely are just there because it's real. There's a reality here. Now you can't keep that reality. You know, that's where people get in trouble. But we were able to create a reality that was very believable for us for the 10 weeks that we shot. Yeah.
So for the time that this movie was made, that was a pretty gruesome transformation scene. Would you agree?
Are you on my opinion?
Well, the question kind of goes hand in hand, but I mean, I don't know what else was being shot for that, but I mean, compared to that.
In terms of other types of, well, yeah, you know.
Basically, what I wanted to know was like, what was the audience? Because you said the reviews were mixed, right?
Yes.
So what I was curious about was the audience's initial reaction to the transformation scenes, because
Yes.
it seemed like those were pretty intense for the time.
They were intense. And, you know, in the marketing of the film, just to give you an example, John wanted people to understand that this was not a John Landis comedy. Don't come in here, this isn't a Kentucky Fried Movie. You know, this is his horror film. And so one of the phrases was from the director of Animal House, a different kind of animal. And that's on the posters. And occasionally people have those posters, and those were the sort of subtle, sometimes subtle, because people were going, come on kids, let's go see this movie. And they were freaked out. Many people left. People were getting up and going out, going, I couldn't, after you got attacked, that was it. You know? And you can't blame them because they were going there with the anticipation of seeing some kind of a rollicking, who knows what. Because it is funny to start with, but that's where he's taking. John's taking you down this, hey, it's a buddy movie. These guys are gonna go backpack, ha ha ha. And it gets pretty strange. It's particularly, you know, it just so happened, coincidentally, because of the fact that Rick Baker wanted as much time as he could, so we saved the transformation so the movie was completely done, wrapped, and just me and Rick and the skeleton film crew to shoot the transformation. But in the beginning, so we got a chance to start the movie at the beginning, which is very rare, where day one is scene one. We're coming down the road, and here we come in the sheep, and we're in the truck with the sheep and the guy, and stick to the road, boys, and sort of easing into the film that way. For us, it helped as well, I think. to sort of get a sense of, okay, we'll take it right from the beginning, and maybe, and then as soon as we got attacked, and Griffin gets attacked, Rick had his first major makeup scene to perform, and that was the wolf head. So he had a wolf head that he basically would, and he was like a puppeteer. He had the wolf head in his arm, and it was big. And he was saying to Griffin, now, I don't have many of these, so go easy. We don't know what's gonna happen, because you don't really know. You don't rehearse a lot of the film. You talk about it, and you get positions, and they wanna see, and John's that way too. He would want to see positioning, and some camera guys, and everybody knows what we're shooting, and it's in the script. But when it comes time to Griffin actually being attacked, he's not going to show you it until we're rolling. And for both Rick and for Griffin, they weren't really sure, because we're all kind of new. It's like day 3. You don't really know, even though we've been working with Rick in the pre-production, you don't really know until you're rolling. And there's that adrenaline. Now the cameras are going to roll. Everything's lit. What's going to happen here? Let's see. And that's time after time after time. Let's see, because nobody really knew how the makeup was going to work. And so anyway, Rick had said to Griffin, "Go easy, because this took whatever, it took 5 months to make. When I'm attacking you, I'll go easy, but just please don't, Well, take one. Griffin practically rips the head off of Rick's arm and destroys snout number 1. Like, this could set us back. And Rick was pissed, and he tells the story. Say, okay, we're gonna play rough. Take 2. He literally went after Griffin. I mean, and these are big teeth and this big old, and he got after Griffin, and that's in the movie. So Griffin's going, ouch, because it hurt. Going, oh, too bad, Griffin. Should have played along. But no, the thing is, it was really it's intense, and you don't know that. And then you cut, and there's always people come in, want to make sure everybody's okay, and then Landis would come in and go, I need more blood, which was his favorite thing to say. I need more blood. He wanted gore, in a tasteful way. Nothing gratuitous. And that wasn't necessarily a criticism from reviewers. I remember Roger Ebert interviewing us. Siskel and Ebert were interviewing us and asking us, just sort of, I don't know, I just remember saying, like, you weren't there to get a sense of, these are not academic questions. So how did you approach the attack? It's like, you're being attacked. How would you approach it? It's pretty simple. It's like, you're scared, we're running, it's out in the cold. We were in England, in November, well, not in November, in February, March. It's really cold. So it's uncomfortable, it's wet, it's dark, there's sounds. You don't have to have a huge imagination to get in to the mood of how creepy it is. One of the big questions was, how much of the wolf do you see? And that was a question between, conversation that Rick Baker and John Landis had as the director and the effects guy. How much are you going to show? And Rick didn't want to show this wolf, and I have to agree with him. What's scarier, seeing the creature or hearing the creature? And let your imagination, decide. And think about the films that you've all seen. At what point do you say, I was really with it until I saw the stupid little creature outside the door, I'm thinking of a movie like Signs, or, where, oh man, I was into it until these things are creeping around. It's not scary, I don't want to see it. And you don't see the wolf. There's that one scene in the
escalator.
The escalator in the underground, where you suddenly see, it's starting to crawl. There's Michael Carter, who does these shows. You see a guy on the escalator, and he's going, good Lord. And you look and you see There it is. And the reason you don't see much more of that, because the rest of it's not even made. You know, the reality is, he's just got arms and legs, front arms, head, and it stops about here as a guy is kind of walking. But he's not even walking. I mean, it was so primitive. You can imagine being like on a board in a wheelbarrow, practically. Not as, hate to spoil it for you, next time you see it, that's a wheelbarrow on a diving board. But you know, it's pretty primitive. And that's how they would get it to move around. And you know, down in Piccadilly too, towards when he's snarling, it's all close-ups of the head and, you know, forearms, because that's all they really had. And some, you know, one arm would be able to, you know, swipe and see arms and claws, but it wasn't a complete wolf. And how big this thing was has been subject to interpretation. Now in the transformation, you see it when I'm there in the floor and this body is stretching out. You go, how big is this thing? You know, it's 9 feet long from head to stretched out body, and turns around, and then how big is it? So, anyway, yes, gory, yes, more blood. He liked his blood, Mr. Landis. And people freaked out. And you know, a lot of the feedback that I get from when I meet you folks as fans, come to my table, see my photos on there and going, this scared the shit out of me. And thank you very much. That's generally what I hear. And you know, it's because it's unexpected. You know, the cool thing about the script is it takes you down one way and man, it's gonna turn on you and scare you. There are a number of scares. When I saw the movie the first time at a screening, I sat by myself at Universal watching the movie going, man, this isn't the way to watch this movie. You know, you want to see it with an audience that's never seen any of this, you know, because I didn't really know exactly how it was going to go over. And seeing it in the theater, I remember being in Times Square, one of the big movie theaters in Times Square in New York City, and being in the back while this waft of pot smoke is like circulating in the theater. Hey, this, you know, is this how you're supposed to watch this movie? And seeing people jump out of their seats, particularly, you know, in the hospital when the blinds come open, it was a huge scare. You know, the Nazi demons are there. You know, and there are numerous little moments where there's some big scares. So, what time is it? Am I like way over? I'm getting sleepy. So that's, you know, what can I tell you? That's kind of, we had fun doing it because we knew there were times when it were going to be scary. But, oh, this is going to scare somebody, you know. But then there were those surprises as well. And there were some funny moments, and casting was another thing where John was casting right off of, you know, the West End Theater and little theaters and, you know, Fringe, what they call Fringe, which is sort of off Broadway, is the Fringe Theater in London. And people, actors would all, you know, the guys in the pub were all fairly well-known actors, with the exception of, you know, Rick Mayall, who people know and went on to have quite a career. He's since passed away. But he was a comic and was unknown at the time, so we didn't know him. And I've been asked that over the years, did I know Rick Mayall? But there are other, David Schofield, who's had a big career. He was the Elephant Man in the West End. He's the guy going, you made me miss. That actor is starring in the West End in the Elephant Man, and he so happens to be playing this, you know, guy in our film. So we had a lot of great, Brian Glover, who died soon after the film, plays, you know, jumps up, you know, that whole guy in the pub tells the story. So we had a lot of really, really good supporting actors. John Woodvine is still doing shows. He worked, you see him, you know, in like the Avengers. I looked and there was this shot of all these old men, and I looked and I went, holy, that's John Woodvine, my God. This is, you know, the most recent one. I looked him up, he's like 94 years old. He's still working as an actor. You go, how the heck is that? I'm going, am I going to be in Indy? The Days of the Dead, 42. Thank you, here I am. No, you know, at some point you hang it up. I don't know when that'll be for me. Usually for most actors, it's when they can't learn any more lines. And that's been the case. It's like, I just can't learn the lines anymore. I don't want to, go through the terror of being on, because when the camera's on you, there ain't nothing like it. When that light's on and everything's quiet and they're watching you, you better, if you forget your lines at that point, you can't get them back. It happens to everybody, and you just have to kind of know when that moment is. Sort of like me, I have to kind of know when to get off. Are there any other burning questions? Anybody like to share anything? Come by, say hello. It's great to have you folks here. Obviously, I get a kick out of talking about this show. Let's hope this whole pandemic thing goes away and we can continue to enjoy shows like Days of the Dead around the world. Thanks for coming out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Naughton. Thank you.